Well, I will continue where I stopped yesterday. And yesterday was more general talk about plant grow and about early environmental education. And I already yesterday had some questions about how and what to measure and how to measure, and requests to share some tools. And I kind of expected these questions, and that's why I have much shorter talk today. And again, I will go back to the format with presentation because I believe that some people who have difficulties with language, they can read what is there, and then I can, of course, talk and discuss. And if there are any questions later on, they can both ask them here or mail me later on. I think my email has been posted, and people can find me. And actually, it's very easy to find me if you just Google my name, and then you find how to find me. So I will share my screen, and I would like to say again, welcome to everybody who decided to join us today. So I start with connecting to nature, and again, lifestyle and health. It's a little bit connected to the title of yesterday, but today we are talking actually how to plan an early childhood study, because those who work in the academia like I do, we kind of have protocols, and we know we've done it many, many times, but there are so many brilliant people who are doing amazing work out there who are not at the university level. And very often I would get questions, how and what do you recommend? And they just need a little bit like a toolbox, and they actually can measure and to conduct the studies that are much better than we are conducting, because they have this very fine feeling how to do things. We just have our theories, and I will be talking about. And actually, the idea, of course, that's wrong. This one, something. Has it been recording on top of everything? It's of course we want to know how everything is connected, and how is the butterflies are connected, and how are the playing outside and nature is connected. And we, of course, this is the question that we are asking ourselves when we do any study, when we plan any study. What is important to understand in this situation, that what we see, like let's say butterflies and food, sometimes people say, well, that is definitely not connected, and how can you put nature in the whole equation? And I will try to explain and hopefully to convince you that actually it is very much connected. First of all, usually you have to have an idea what you want to study and why you're conducting any study. And first of all, you have some kind of aim, or if you do psychology, then it will be hypothesis you're testing. But actually what we tried to do in my situation, in our research, CN stands for connectedness to nature. And we wanted to understand or to test if one can increase this connectedness to nature, to outside world, through different activities in the nature and also through the education. And when we have done that, we believe that, or hoped, or to achieve that the increase in this connectedness to nature, and I'm talking about families with preschool children. I'm talking about families, or it can be a school, like kindergarten setting, because preschool children are never by themselves. They're usually surrounded by some kind of structure around them, either their parents or kindergarten, for example. So if this CN in the families with preschool children will actually influence lifestyle changes, not only any lifestyle changes, but positive lifestyle changes. And in this situation is active play and happy children, if you translate it to the scientific language, will be mental health and of course the better diet. And of course, I would like in a nutshell to say that from watching TV, we would like people to go to nature and to learn and to replace this TV with nature education. Again, when you are a scientist, or even if you're not a scientist, when you plan a study, you have to have some kind of conceptual model or some kind of theory. And that's how, for example, I share with you my own study. You have the timeline, and then you kind of see what will be happening in the beginning, and then what are your short-term outcomes, long-term outcomes. You have to subdivide everything, and what you try to influence, let's say in this situation, it's general parenting practices. And again, we looked at eating, feeding, physical activity, and then being happy. And also how that would influence the children's behaviors by itself. Because again, as we know that when we talk about preschool children, we cannot only talk about them, there is a structure around that. So we have to take that in consideration. When I worked in Hong Kong, of course, it was not only parents, it was grandparents, and it was domestic helpers, those who were taking care of these children. So we have to include even those people around children. So when we measure something, we want to know what to measure. And then you do a proper research. All research, you can do it online, of course. And this is just an example how you create that evidence. So different associations to health in very early childhood. You say, let's say that weight gain during pregnancy, what does it mean for later on? Diet quality and quantity, parental practices, etc. And you could see the blue numbers here. These are actually the references. We have the whole document. So if I want to know, okay, how TV screen or viewing time, how does have to do, what it has to do with the health in children, I go to those references, pick them up and check, yes, what it has, what references, who has done already studies in that. So it's very, very heavy document. And that's why when I decide, like, yeah, I know that I want actually to assess TV or screening time, and parents or other scientists would ask me why, I would say, okay, and then I have a pile of evidence that is actually reflected here that I can always say that's why, actually, because it's proven that it has to do with health in infants. So that's how you kind of dissect all your ideas, and then you do a proper research trying to find out already published evidence. And then you create these tools. You think, okay, I want to study simply active play, eating habits, of course, connectedness to nature, and psychological well-being. And then you kind of decide, so what tools do I use? How do I measure all of this? And here's the examples of what tools already exist. And of course, I will show you now that connectedness to nature did not exist. So we had to develop it later on. Then we look at the questionnaires. So you start to look at the questionnaires, and this is from one of our publications my student published, quite, you could see a long time ago. CBQ, which is very famous questionnaire with child eating behavior questionnaire. And when we started to test this world-known questionnaire in particular setting in Hong Kong, we realized that no, actually it needs to be adjusted because the Chinese situation is very different. The eating habits are different between England, where it was developed, the CBQ, and that's why it's actually not directly. You cannot take a questionnaire and start applying it directly. It would not, you would not be measuring what you think you're measuring. How to measure, this third question, how to measure connectedness to nature? Because remember, we tried to to say that we do something with connectedness to nature, and that in turn would influence some positive habits. Well, you can see that connectedness to nature is highly age-specific, and especially for young children, there was nothing. You could see that in preschoolers, there was no questionnaires. It's very difficult to measure. There are for adults, for school children, etc., etc. And the closest we came to it was actually CNI, and that was, but that was for 4th grade school children. And we thought, okay, these were still young children, and we could try to start and to go from there. And unfortunately, it did not work at all. You could see about 50% of our parents, when we start to do it, they could not understand the questions. The questionnaire that was already validated, it was a famous questionnaire. And we understood, like, okay, we have to do the thematic content analysis. And then, of course, we did the whole from scratch. We had to validate this questionnaire, and it was very different actually in Hong Kong. And we did first study, and then we did the second study, etc. So, and that's why it's a long path to say later on that, yes, it is valid for Hong Kong or for any environment when you have done it in the local situation. Finally, we did it after 3-4 years, and it became a valid and reliable measurement for the connectedness to nature. For very young children, when they cannot actually answer by themselves, it's parents who would observe, and then they would cross and grade their children, or caregivers, I would say. And that becomes very important because at that time, again, nobody could measure that. And of course, that gives you a tool to compare different studies and also to look at the psychological functioning and well-being. This is how it looks like. On the right side, there are final loading, etc. You don't need to look at it. But what we came up at the end, these are the questions that kind of crystallized during the entire study. We just didn't invent them, but they grouped themselves during this very, very robust statistical analysis. There were 4 factors, 4 groupings. First of all, it was enjoyment of nature, empathy for nature, sense of responsibility, and awareness of nature. So these were our kind of core factors that describe how children relate to nature. Then when you have this tool, you decide, okay, either you can do the pilot study, or when you have done it, you go to a very heavy tool, which is called Randomized Control Trial, RCTs. And that is a golden standard, actually, of the trials. And you could see the design is much more complicated. You need to have controls, and you have follow-ups, etc. On the left side, you have the pilot study, quite simple, straightforward. And then on the right side, you have the randomized control trial. And of course, we publish it. So you publish when you describe the procedure, how you do, you publish it, and other people can actually replicate, and they can imitate this study and also try to do it. Because again, in Greece, it would be a different situation, and you would have a different results. But everything is described in this study. It's called study protocol. I do recommend to publish it. The examples of our food nature games that we use in our study, you can actually scan here, and you can watch them, because they are, when in our study, we only have 10 sessions, and we have 1 vegetable for each session. And for let's say in 1 session, we have avocado, and the next session we have cucumber, so we have 10. When we all were, when the COVID started and we all were in lockdown and we could not conduct our play groups, parents were really asking me, can you please put at least these games online? And that's what I did. We put them online, but we thought like, oh, why not make more than just 10? And we created one vegetable per each letter of alphabet. So we made the vegetable ABC, and all of them are on YouTube. They're very short, 3 minutes. Nobody's talking there. It's only music, and we're showing how to do, how we play with this particular vegetable, starting from A for avocado, B for beetroot, etc. All the way, the entire ABC. I do recommend to watch them, and if you like them, you can share that with your families or with your schools. Children usually like those games. Here I just wanted to show, of course, it was food games, but then it was the nature games, like nature with the leaves, etc. You're probably doing the same exercises there with your children when you're playing. And again, physical activity that we call physical activity or active play. That's what we do with children. You could see we teach them to walk on the rope. This is motor skills. And of course, they are, as you can see, trying to stretch here, and they can do it everywhere. And this is our avocado game with the avocado boat and guacamole. And children loved it, of course, when you dig this little avocado and you try to eat it. And then finally, you get get back, and then you take this little boat and we go outside and we put it in a little puddle of water, and children just love it. So that is the way how, let's say, we conduct the intervention, or how we planned it and how we went all the way through it. So what I would like to suggest very briefly and very briefly, that you have to plan properly what you want to do. You have to have, of course, an idea. You observe something and you think like, okay, I think that is what I do in my with my children, playing or doing something that actually influence them in a certain way. So you have an idea. Do an online research. It's really important, because maybe somebody else is doing something similar and they have already made tools how to measure it, for example. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Then you look at it and say like, okay, they did that. They already tried something. I don't need to try that. So you modify your idea. So you kind of improve it based on what everybody else has done. And then you choose, okay, what do you want to measure? And that's why I showed in the beginning all those ideas, like what actually does have influence on health, for example. That was in my case. And then you use the reliable tools. That's very important. If you use good tools, I mean questionnaires, or if you want to measure weight, for example, then you also have to measure, to use reliable tools, right? So you choose those measuring tools, and you do a little pilot study and see if it really works, like we did, and we realized parents don't understand our tools. They're fantastic, they're published, they're international, but our parents in China did not understand them. So do a little pilot, I strongly recommend it. And you try to publish it. And I think publishing is important, because when you have that publication, you can go with it everywhere. You can talk to people, like I write smart words when you talk to very important people who have grants, who may give you some money. Then you use different vocabulary, right? You would say early environmental education. And when you talk to the normal people like all of us, and who really understand nature and will believe that hugging the tree, you could either call it early environmental education, or you could say, yeah, we go out and play in the dirt and hug the trees. Then you use the simplified language, that is normal language. So that's important depending on whom you talk to and what you want. And of course, if you have some publication, you can waive it and with it, and of course it will be very helpful for you. I do suggest you could see that this is play and grow evidence. So when I talk about play and grow study, with anybody. I mentioned yesterday, we got millions from Hong Kong government to conduct this study all over Hong Kong. It's been disseminated now, even Perth in Australia was interested to take some parts of it and do it. And in Chile, of course. Because when I say that, look, this is the evidence-based program. It's not just my idea. I think it's good to go and hug a tree. It's actually, we have proven, and you could see here what we have proven. I say that this is probably one of the very few evidence-based studies that if you do that, you have that outcome. And we had outcome on better eating, more active play, better mental health, and even on the gut microbiome. I have one little picture later on. Well, actually, you could see it here, the impact of outdoor related activities on gut microbiota in serotonin, for example, and perceived stress in preschool children. So I suggest that you can look through them if you're interested in any of this literature, but just have an idea that that's how you build up evidence for whatever you're doing. And that's, I think that's all time I had for today. Yeah. Yeah, I recorded that before. Okay, so I stop here and maybe you can have some questions. If anybody has any questions.
Yes, thank you. That's fascinating what you've been presenting. I'm sorry I missed the first one as well.
Don't worry.
Yes, that's right. I can catch up with it later. Yeah. It's fascinating that the circle is kind of turning towards this appreciation of the importance of children being in nature, but also of adults being in nature. You know, I watched a program last week about, you know, doctors actually getting around to prescribing people going into nature as their as you know, as their medicine. So it's fantastic that you're building up this bank of knowledge and research about it. And it's, you know, for a long time, I think a lot of our schools were doing that kind of instinctively and intuitively, but to have it backed up by research is very reassuring for parents, I think, when they think, oh, there must be a time for the kids to stop doing this and get to the books and get to the desks and stuff like this, you know. Yeah, so it's very important. And yes, and I think your sort of advice for how other people can go about this process will be very helpful to people.